What's going on, guys? This is Hitchy Good, your favorite all-American freedom-loving gamer, and today we're once again diving into something that I deem that's a little more important than gaming, as much as I enjoy gaming, but we're going to dive into the subject of free speech. In this episode, we got a lot to cover, and there's a little bit of context to put in here, so I want you to bear with me. We're going to go over the reinstating of free speech under Elon Musk's new ownership of Twitter. We're going to talk about why hate speech is absolutely not a thing, and if you disagree with me, please talk to me in the comments below. I enjoy Discord. I really do. We're also going to talk about my encounter with renowned content creator RivalXFactor Gaming, who inferred his support for censorship and his claims that I know nothing about free speech. And finally, we're going to shed light on the recent breaking news of the Department of Homeland Security compelling social media platforms to bend to their definition of censorship in order to silence dissent and wield the digital public square as a weapon, as a propaganda tool to hold power over its own citizens. So please, watch all the way through, as each and every one of these topics is imperative that we have a complete and thorough understanding of. And if you disagree with me or have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below. I love talking to people I disagree with. It's simply a whole lot less boring than an echo chamber. So let's go ahead and get started. On the heels of Elon Musk taking over Twitter, it's very obvious that the billionaire has wasted absolutely no time at all in revamping the platform, firing executives, and he just recently, today, ended up firing the whole freaking board, and he released the bonds of censorship from Twitter's users. This has brought a widespread debate over free speech and what people should and shouldn't be allowed to say on the internet. Numerous MSNBC reporters and CNN anchors and leftist politicians are talking about the quote-unquote dangers of allowing people to just say what they want, which is what I thought this country was actually built upon, but my bad. The prime fear from the left is what they like to call hate speech. It's their new trigger word. That's what they go to. Something that literally is by design an arbitrary measurement to dismiss and silence voices that simply oppose different ideas. This entire time, they're wielding the innocence of it. Hate speech. Everyone is against hate speech, right? Well, this is exactly why the left has gone so far out of their way to label literally anything and everything as racist or homophobic or hateful. So while I absolutely believe that racism and sexism is real, it's out there, and I believe it's wrong, I believe it's disgusting, I will defend anyone's right to say those racist or sexist things. Their right to do so. I'm not going to myself, but anyone's right to free speech is everyone's right to free speech. And where it is attacked to single out an individual, it's an attack on everyone else. Because if I'm complacent with the status quo of censorship, as you may be as well, those are rights I'm giving up for those other people, that I'm saying it's okay to take their rights. I'd be a fool to think that the same society, the same government, will not eventually come for mine as well. You're either for free speech or you're against it. There's no two ways about it. The role of the government is to protect the rights of an individual, and that being the case, speech that encroaches on another's right to safety, inciting a riot or instructing someone to go commit acts of violence is already illegal, as it should be. The problem here is that you have these far left activists who are branding hate speech, there's that arbitrary word that can mean literally anything again, branding hate speech as violent. And what is the only solution to meeting violence head on? That's right, you meet it with violence. That's why you see far more leftists inciting riots, harassing others. The instance of the angry leftist who ran a teen down with his car a few months ago and killed him for being an extremist Republican. I think that was right after Joe Biden, in fact, labeled half the country as a bunch of extremists. And we know this is what set that off, because the criminal that ran that teen down in his car said, well, he needed to die because he's a quote-unquote extremist Republican. And it's all justified with, your words are violent, so I have no other recourse but to enact violence back on you. Except that's not really how the real world works here. Words are not violent. So when Joe Biden labels half the country as enemies of the state, that leaves a target-rich environment to attack anyone for hate speech by labeling voting Republican, cultural appropriation, and even the OK sign as quote-unquote racist. That gives the left free rein to silence anyone. They run on this mantra of, show me the person, I'll show you the racist, I'll show you the white supremacist, I'll show you the homophobe. No one will ever be pure enough for the left, even their own in many stances. And they don't care about those that, fall between the cracks because All they care about is who is participating in wrongthink. It's even gone so far as to making criticizing movies racist, sexist, or homophobic if you don't like them. Such was the case with Star Wars, The Rings of Power, She-Hulk, and even Buzz Lightyear. It's gotten to the point that studios deliberately put controversial subjects in their movies and TV shows, so when you criticize them, or anyone criticizes them, they can just deflect. Oh, you don't like Buzz Lightyear? Well, you're a homophobe. You don't like Star Wars? You're sexist. You don't like Rings of Power? You're a racist. You don't like She-Hulk? Well, you're against equal rights for women. So when we start saying, yeah, let's ban people for hate speech, it's a really freaking bad idea. Everything listed above can be used as a weapon to silence individuals based on whatever definition they want to use as hate speech at any given time. That's why hate speech has no legal definition in the United States. It's literally not there. What's even worse is the manufactured hate from the left to falsely stir up racism. Remember Jussie Smollett, or however you freaking pronounce his name. It's not really that important. He's not that much of an important individual for me for lying about the crap he went through. But that whole thing was just one instance of dozen. If you don't remember, he falsely claimed in court that he was beaten up and said this is by two gentlemen wearing MAGA hats, this is MAGA country, and he beat himself up and made himself a victim. Well, one instance of dozen. And it's turning up again on Twitter. A small group of liberals have now started slinging around the N-word and tweeting racist remarks in order to make Elon Musk look bad. While individuals like RivalXFactor want to gin up worry and angst and pretend it's a widespread problem when we look further into this, those racial slurs only came from 300 accounts out of the millions on Twitter who are deliberately doing it to allow the media to arrive at the number of a 500% increase in racial slurs in one day on Twitter. That's basically 300 undercover Jussie Smollets who are basically pressing a boot to their own face and adjusting the camera angle just so you can't see that they're the ones that are really perpetrators. Now, getting to my discussion, if you can call it that, with RivalXFactor, and I guess before we do that, listen, RivalXFactor, appreciate your content. I think it's great. I used to watch you when you would do collabs with Neebs Gaming way back in the day, like Battlefield 4. That stuff was freaking awesome, and kudos for you for building a larger audience than what I have, or maybe even wish to hope for. So that's fantastic. We're not talking about the success of your YouTube channel. So RivalXFactor tweeted a lament over how awful it was that Twitter was now a cesspool of racists and bigots, even though, just like I explained, it's not even close to being widespread, which led to my questioning him. That was mostly just a bunch of name calling and saying, I don't know what I'm talking about, I need to read more, etc. The general exclamations of someone who is not prepared for an in-depth discussion. So X has constantly leaned on this trope of, and many people do, of government agrees with me, so I'm right. But when I asked him if he agreed with everything the Supreme Court does, I had to ask him a few times, and then he said, I agree with the system, which wasn't what I asked. Because if X doesn't agree with what the court does 100% of the time, then the whole government said I was right line really doesn't hold any water. You're only going to cite the government when they agree with you, and you're going to be against them when they don't. So why even bring that up? I finally got across to him that giving the power to censor individuals would lead to the government utilizing social media platforms to silence political dissenters in an attempt to grab and retain power. And of course, he responded. He said, come back to me when that happens. Well, X, it's already happening. But I do think it's quite poetic that after less than 48 hours of you saying this, whoops, cat's out of the bag, and proof has come out that the Department of Homeland Security is in cahoots with social media platforms in order to silence opposition and prevent questioning of what we're told. And with as many dystopian games as X-Factor has played in his life, you'd think he'd say, oh, I've seen this story before. But no. Instead, we're just going to be happy to be led along like happy little sheep, ready to give power to authority to silence others into submission at all costs. All based on the false premise of a 500% increase in racial slurs on Twitter. On that false statement. How short-sighted we have become. Now, I do want to take a moment to read just a snippet of this article, and I'll link the address below for your further investigation. We're not going to read all of it, but in this article, it talks about, DHS quietly broadening its efforts to curb speech it considers quote-unquote dangerous And The Intercept is who put this together. It says the work, much of which remains unknown to the American public, came into clear view earlier this year when DHS announced a new Disinformation Governance Board, a panel designed to police misinformation, false information spread unintentionally, disinformation, false information spread intentionally, and malinformation, factual information shared typically out of context with harmful intent. They're the reason that you see all these little notices on your Facebook profile posts, on your Twitter posts, and the rest. And all of these allegedly threaten U.S. interests. Maybe U.S. interests of keeping Joe Biden in office. While the board was widely ridiculed, immediately scaled back, and then shut down within a few months, other initiatives are underway as DHS pivots to monitoring social media now that its original mandate, the war on terror, has been wound down. Behind closed doors and through pressure on private platforms, the U.S. government has used its power to try to shape online discourse. According to the meeting minutes and other records appended to a lawsuit filed by Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt, a Republican who is also running for Senate, discussions have ranged from the scale and scope of government intervention in online discourse to the mechanics of streamlining takedown requests for false or intentionally misleading information. Platforms have got to get comfortable with government. It's really interesting how hesitant they remain. Microsoft executive Matt Masterson, a former DHS official, texted Jen Easterly, a DHS director, in February. In a March meeting, Laura Demlau, an FBI official, warned that the threat of subversive information on social media could undermine support for the U.S. government. Demlau, according to notes of the discussion attended by senior executives from Twitter and JP Morgan Chase, stressed that we need, quote, we need a media infrastructure that is held accountable. This is actually dangerous. This is so dystopian, and to see so many gaming content creators line up with this is just incredibly shocking. Now, of course, I wouldn't have a problem with this censorship if it were done honestly and openly. If Facebook or YouTube were to say, you know, we don't want conservative views on our platform, and then run with it, I'd have a lot easier time with that than just labeling anything and everything as hate speech. Because what these platforms have become are publishers. They're not public platforms anymore. Section 230 of the Federal Code allows public platforms to not be held legally accountable for things said on their platform. For instance, if a group of Antifa thugs decided to plan a riot on Facebook and burn down 50 businesses in one night, those businesses could not legally sue Facebook. However, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and formerly Twitter, hopefully formerly Twitter, have all censored speech on their platform, which absolves them from the Section 230's protections by law. If you censor nothing, then you aren't held accountable for the ramifications of it. However, in picking and choosing what you censor, then you become liable for everything else stated on the platform, as you are giving it your stamp of approval that this is okay, making you a publisher and not a public platform. So Facebook, YouTube, Instagram should all have their Section 230 protections removed immediately if we're going to follow the law. But anyways, if you want to hear more rants like these, click on the video in the end card that explains why I am a pro-gun gamer. Other than that, God bless, happy gaming, get you good out.